Nice to see everyone. Is there anyone new who hasn't been here in a little while or has never been here? You want to take just 30 seconds to introduce yourselves? No one knew you all have been here before?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Nisha.
So hello, I am new. This is my first time joining this session. So I'm quite interested in understanding what are we discussing. I joined a few minutes late and this is my first time joining here. So
Awesome, nice to meet you, Nisha. Christina?
Yeah, hi, my name is Christina. I'm not new here. I did join a while ago, maybe a year or a bit more longer ago. And I'm a researcher based in Finland. And I do research on innovation, ecosystem orchestration, and currently on hackathons.
Perfect. This is a great community for you. Nice to meet you. Feel free to put your LinkedIn profiles in the chat too, so we can connect with you that way. Anyone else?
I want to hear from Thomas Jajeh.
What do you want to hear, John?
I want to hear why you got a haircut for this.
Thomas.
Why I got a haircut for this? Okay, it's not my first time here. I think since the beginning of the series, but then I have a little bit of a timeout in the last weeks and months. Happy to be back here, and I have the pleasure today with my colleague Hary to talk a bit.
Who's a first timer? So I'm a first timer.
Trend report here that we issued just earlier this year.
Awesome.
Love it. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, so and we'll get to you guys in just a second. So anyone else new, feel free to put your LinkedIn profile in the chat. We'll connect with you that way. Let's talk about some upcoming announcements. So Outvise and Balaji, I know we definitely want to hear from you about some recent updates on your end. So I don't know who is here from Outvise. Let me know. And go ahead, Anna.
Hi, this is Anna. Yes, yeah, it's me from Outvise. Sorry, I did not put the company name there.
That's okay. Share with us what you got going on.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly share that. Well, first of all, I'm happy to be on this calls again. I love the community, you know. I wanted to invite you all to our upcoming webinar. We are going to speak about freelance platforms and how can they embrace diversity and gender, which is probably going to be very interesting to hear. Not that much AI this time, just the gender and diversity. So I'm going to just drop a link here in case you're interested. We are more than happy to invite you and to see you there. And I'm going to touch the banner quickly, so hopefully you can make it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. Balaji, you've got something going on. Tell us.
I don't know if I have something going on, but I think I do have thoughts going on in my mind. But I think it's what I think the better way to do this is just frame out a set of questions for the group, for us all to have conversation about what we think is happening and what we think is going to happen. Because I can tell you, anybody that thinks that they know what's going to happen is statistically, some of them might be right, but there's no way anybody can know what's going on. So I think the conversation is fundamentally about what's going to happen with generative AI. How is that going to impact us as people, our own work, our communities, our platforms, our business models, and there's a wide range of things that might happen. Again, we always sometimes there's a way to think about people and technology in two different silos, whereas whenever you think about outcomes as the final goal that any client is buying from us, if technology can serve that outcome in a more economical manner, there'll be some movement. It doesn't mean that it'll be wholesale and everybody is going to move, but even understanding what that could look like, what are the indicators for that, what are the precursors for that, what leading data do you see, could you identify so that some shift is happening? And then how do you change your own business model to lead that shift versus be a victim to that shift is a conversation. And that is different for everybody, different for everybody's work. It's different for everybody's model, and it's different for everybody's agency to change what's coming. So high level questions, okay? From the most basic level, Do you use ChatGPT or any other generative AI applications to do your work, or do you currently primarily use it for play? You can put it in chat, or you can come up and say something. Either way is fine. I'd love for somebody to talk as well.
Thanks, Balaji. Yeah, and I think we were also interested in, I think this is definitely a conversation for a future meetup too, which I think we will be doing. I was also curious though about, you were recently at Harvard delivering your Pixel case study. Do you want to give us an update on that? And then we'll do those questions for a future meetup.
Okay, well, I don't know what topic you wanted me to hit, and I'm probably confused with the two meetings. But I do want to still finish one more question, and then we can move on. Okay.
Cool.
What percentage of your work or your team's work do you foresee to be reduced by generative AI in the next 12 months? Reduced, not impacted, reduced.
So are you looking at reduced in a positive way, like it reduces the amount of time it takes them to produce a project or job? Or are you looking at this as a reduction of it's replacing their work somehow and they're not getting as much work?
I feel like both of them are kind of the same in my mind. If you're going to take 100 hours to do a piece of work with generative AI, if it reduces 20% of that effort across 10 members doing that same work, now you don't need 2 people.
Right. I think that's for the individual worker themselves. Like it helps me, enables me to be able to do research and cut down my time, the amount of time a project takes. But I think that it's also being used as a way of replacing some people that have done that work before, and now they don't need them. One person can do the project that maybe 3 people had done prior to. And
totally.
so
It means 2 other people might not get hired.
Right. I see it as that has both sides of the story.
Okay. Great. I appreciate it. And I think if you think about these 10, 15, and Brian think it's 40%, which, it's totally possible as well. Like, what is that? How does that impact freelancers? How does that impact does that mean that if a platform is generating, 1 million hours last year, will it now generate only 850,000 hours of work? And as such, is that going to decline their top line or not? I think these are just questions that we have to think about, because we're not used to thinking about technology as our competitor. We're used to thinking about either FTEs or staffing firms or whoever other people-based models as our competitors. We now have to start thinking about technology being a true competitor. And what does that do to the business model? How do you ride that wave versus get swept under it? I don't have answers, but I just want to ensure that you're thinking about those questions.
I think the way to survive it is to embrace it. I'm fascinated with this. I spend a lot of time writing and figure out what that next step is. But the fact of the matter is that it's going to fundamentally alter the way so much stuff gets done. The metaphor for the maturity of the technology, I heard in a presentation earlier this week, was that you wouldn't need to think of these technologies as similar to a mildly competent intern, right? So it's not necessarily something that's going to give you the finished product out the gate, but it'll get you started and eliminate the time. So the metaphor that I use with a lot of people is you're going to find people who are super skilled at, for example, the particular domain, maybe it's coding or graphic arts or writing or whatever, and they're going to become very, very skilled at using these technologies to get more done. So their contribution is going to be totally on adding really high-end strategic value, right? And so they're going to be able to get the same quality of work done in less time, let's say 50%. People who don't embrace that technology, who don't have the same level of efficiency, will still be bidding at 100% of their time. So what's going to happen is they're going to find a situation where people who are not embracing this technologies will be forced to slowly reduce their rates, embrace air quotes, to find their way to be more competitive with the guy who's more effective to be able to deliver the same output for much less money and much less time. So I think overall, we're going to see at a minimum the idea that you're not going to be replaced with AI. In some roles definitely will be. You're definitely going to be replaced by somebody who embraces AI, right? So the person who takes advantage of these technologies and leverages them effectively will be the person or the thing or the entity that replaces your job. I don't know if anytime soon a lot of us are going to find a situation where the machine is going to replace the man. I wrote an article about this today on LinkedIn, if anyone's interested. So,
lovely. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Brian, make sure you
this-
share that link in the chat too.
Go ahead, Rob.
Hey, Neelaj, I've been doing a little research into specific departments. So, and I posted some research up into LinkedIn. So I looked at sales, I looked at HR, I looked at operations, and at least my research is showing each one of those has a different kind of scale associated with them, how much AI is going to directly impact or not impact. I think HR was one of the ones that was higher, potentially going as high as 30% replacement. And so I think it's not a general question, kind of going back to where you look at it. I think we have to look at it almost either at a task level or from a position level within the organization as a way to start to break it down and think it through.
Perfect.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks. I think this is a great research question for another topic for sure. And I know Thomas and Hary will be able to weigh in on, give us some high level perspective too, which is a great segue. So thanks everyone. Thank you for that. Thanks, Balaji. If anyone else from the community has events or things coming up that they want to share, just put that link in the chat and we'll circulate it with the show notes. So thank you. I do want to say as a good segue too, before I introduce our two guests, I think it's so important to reiterate how important it is to Open Assembly and to this community that we make sure to include and incorporate global perspectives from the staffing industry into these conversations. We can't achieve our mission without them. Their insights into talent management and workforce strategy are second to none, and we need them, which is one of the many reasons we've brought in Thomas and Hary from Randstad Enterprise to share with us their latest research. So I'm gonna turn it over to both of you.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen. So, hey, thanks for having us. We're really excited to be talking to Open Assembly today, and it's my first time, and it's a really interesting conversation. I think ChatGPT and generative AI are going to be a big topic for everyone to cover. But I'm the managing director of what we call a talent advisory group within Randstad. I'm within the Randstad Enterprise Solutions Group. So my team does a lot of consulting work and advisory work with our existing customers and new customers related to talent strategy. And so it's great to be here to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing with our talent trends research. This is research that we do every year. It's a toolkit for our clients and the broader talent community. And it really provides data, case studies, as well as tips and actions for creating a blueprint for your talent strategy. So Thomas and I are going to talk to you a little about it. Thomas, you want to introduce yourself real quick? Before, well, let me go through some of the demographics just to give you a little bit of background on the talent trends report. Just very quickly, every year we try to get to upwards of 1,000 C-suite human capital leaders to give us the input. It's across multi-industries and 18 different markets. And then it results in typically in roughly 10 talent trends that we put forth in the report, and within that we make recommendations of how you can tackle these trends, and in particular what's top of mind for human capital leaders. So I'll pause there before we go into a little bit more detail so Thomas can introduce himself.
Okay, thank you, Hary. So as I already said, I'm Thomas, and my responsibility within Randstad Enterprise is I'm responsible for all the digital field. So my title is Chief Digital Officer. So, we do invest a lot in product builds where we are trying to solve problems, together with our customers that they have that might not be solved on the market. We partner with third-party solutions, of course, data privacy, information security, data as a topic. I'm looking after AI as well. I was carefully listening to the discussion that we kicked off earlier, and information security. And I'm part of the ethical AI and ethical data committee in Randstad as a whole, because there's a topic that we haven't raised is, I think it's, going back to generative AI, it's super cool and very exciting, and we are also experimenting with it, but we are at the same time also rolling this out at large scale. And I wonder if the technology is ready to be rolled out at large scale today. So that's an interesting challenge that I think a lot about at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll speak later about it, about my part, but I'll let Hary continue with the findings here.
Sure. Thanks, Thomas. So there are 10 trends that came out of this year's reports into 3 core categories, but there are 2 in particular that Thomas and I are fairly passionate about. So let's start the conversation. So I'll start off with just some thoughts. So 76% of human capital leaders say talent experience has become more important to their organizations during the last 12 months. So what's interesting to me is I think that statistic is rooted in the fact that we hear about talent scarcity, and talent leaders are constantly talking about that because the businesses are pushing them to find revenue generating talent. However, I would argue that their talent is potentially abundant out there. And if you broaden where you look for that talent and the types of talent in order to find work for them in your organization, I think, and it's important for Thomas and I think in particular, we say create joyful experiences for everyone. I think if you create joyful experiences for everyone in your organization, you will become a destination for talent. So whether you're a freelancer, perm, or temp. And honestly, I think that's what skilled talent wants. They want to build a relationship with an organization that care about the things that they care about, treat them seriously, and enable them to interact in a seamless and digitized way. And they don't really, and an organization that really don't care what employment type that they represent. So I thought that was my kind of tee up to the conversation. Feel free to weigh in. Thomas, anything you would add to that?
No, but I think, if we tie it back to AI, we'll see a lot of automation in like repetitive manual tasks that have been performed by humans. They're not very value adding though. So I think where we will see differentiation is again in the experience, and there are some barriers to a great candidate experience, and we'll see some on the next slide. But it's not only about the candidate experience, right? Hiring managers are living in the normal consumer world as well, and they're exposed to Uber and Amazon, and they expect joyful experiences in their hiring process as well, and their hiring process is very fragmented as well. And recruiters the same, right? Like for recruiters, it's also difficult. You'll see on the next slide there are many different systems. So I think we, in the world of AI, there's actually an opportunity for us to focus the human touch on really creating experiences that matter, right? Rather than spending human time on repetitive, monotonous tasks. Hary, do you want me, we actually don't want to make this a presentation. Yeah. So if anyone wants to weigh in at any moment in time, please interrupt us, right? Like we have a storyline, but please shift it.
Hey, Thomas, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So I totally agree with you about how do we make hiring operations, like how do we introduce the level of customer experience we expect from consumer products? But the constant refrain is everybody says we want to do this, but then the lawyers get involved, ops risk committees get involved. And every time there's a breach or a privacy issue, suddenly the ability to integrate and introduce new technologies, processes gets completely stagnated. So how do we find that balance between empowering humans and safeguarding an organization? And then the second piece of it is HR is one side, but when it comes to freelance, a lot of that is run through business managers and contingent programs who don't have alignment in the goals. So that's a pretty broad statement, but it's something that's held true anytime I've tried to introduce any level of automation or innovation.
Yeah, and I'll give you my thoughts on it, and I think I'll touch both sides, right? HR and contingent not only freelance, but in general contingent. But on your first question, I think it requires education. Some of these people in these organizations are very risk averse or prudent, and they're just waiting for an event, and things will happen, right? Like platforms get hacked, like it happens cybersecurity is a relevant topic. So I think what we need to do is we need to be very diligent in our vendor selection. We need to be very diligent in how we, assess vendors and run a proper process. And then I have seen, actually, if I look at the last 5 years, and I have talked to companies 5 years ago about integrating into their ATS system, and it was like very difficult to do. I think the last 5 conversations that I had didn't take long. Like, I think companies are opening up, but this process is an education process, and it will take time, and it is not over yet. I'll touch upon the freelance versus perm thing on the next slides. Okay.
Yeah, and Thomas, I would add to that, one organization that we're working with is looking to integrate the generative AI into their intranet. So they're embracing it and they're going wholeheartedly into it. And then on the flip side, you might have seen that Samsung has completely banned it from being used. So,
but it's also, the difference is probably, are you using a self-trained model with your own content, or are you using, the Samsung use case was the public model, right? Where it's, as soon as you put company related data into this model, then you already have a breach, basically, because you don't know what's happening to this data. But I think there are, the governance around deploying these technologies needs to be right. And if you run through a proper process, we've had breaches in Randstad with our customers, with some of the third parties that we use. But since we were able to show that we run a proper process and that we followed up and we have a disaster plan, we have a recovery plan, we were always able to manage this. I think people nowadays understand that these things happen. It's the same discussion with Tesla, right? Like, people say, oh, well, autonomous cars, it made a mistake, but humans do mistakes as well. So it's not really a fair comparison to compare 0 to the number of car crashes with Tesla. You have to compare the human, car crashes with the Tesla car crashes. There was another hand going up, or should we continue? Okay, no, but let's stay for 1 second on this other slide. So one problem why this experience is so broken, can you go back, Hary, real quick?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Is that the contingent and the perm recruitment, and you can add finance to this probably, were completely separated functions, and they're all in different tools. You have HCM tools, you have even internal mobility tools like Gloat and so on, where people try to manage their internal mobility. Then you have ATS systems where new applicants come in. You have talent pools where you have for perm, often in CRM systems, where you have your silver medalists or your alumni or your retirees. You have your contingent talent pools, freelance talent pools that you want to nurture, and you have your VMS system. And the whole, for all parties, this is a very disjointed journey. So imagine you're a talent, you apply for a contingent job, you go through this channel. You apply for a freelance job, you talk to the hiring manager. You apply for a perm job, you go through the ATS. And often then there are additional third parties behind those solutions because you need to be vetted, screened, background check, assessed, whatever, right? It's a very disjointed journey for a talent. For the hiring manager, the same, right? Like the poor hiring manager just has a need, right? And he does, or she doesn't really care about, is it a perm or a contingent or whatever. I need a skilled person for that amount of time at that location to do that job. That's what they care about. But then they have to take a decision. Oh, do I go into Gloat and look for an internal, or do I go into the BMS and post a requisition for a contingent worker, or do I go to Upwork and freelancer.com and find a freelancer, or do I go to HR and try to post a job, right? This decision has to be taken before actually knowing anything about the availability of the talent, and all the system landscape is totally dysfunctional. And from a recruiter perspective, it's the same, right? If a requisition comes in, you also don't know, do I look for a perm, if I need to look for a perm candidate, I need to go to the talent pool. If contingent procurement has other goals, has other recruiters, they're looking in the contingent world. They're not looking at perm, they're not looking at internal mobility. So we are not really bringing together all these experiences into one seamless thing. So one thing we have invested in, and Hary, now we can go to the next slide, is we want to fix this with our clients. So what we believe needs to be done is we need to create experience layers for the three parties involved. And we need to leave the technologies wherever they are, but you create an experience layer for the talent, an experience layer for the hiring manager, and an experience layer for the recruiter. And then for the recruiter, it's simple, right? You bring together all the company data into one single repository, and you allow them to match against the requisition in one source. For the hiring manager, you need to run the process more holistically, centrally, without having them go to 10 different platforms. And for the talent, the same. You want one unified application process and one system that then routes them, or not them, but the data into the right system afterwards. What we also did then, once we have done this, we said, well, the recruiter experience layer that aggregates all of the company's data into one system and basically provides a consolidated search and match experience allows the recruiter to match against the company data. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't allow the recruiter or the hiring manager to match against any external data. Freelancer marketplaces, other marketplaces, diverse talent communities, military.com, the Mom Project, you call them. So what we've done is then we've created, there's a mistake on the slide. It's okay. We've created a layer that integrates with all of the Randstad's data and all of our market partners. And that integrates also into this experience layer of the company. So what then happens if you run an RPO or an MSP and the recruiter gets a requisition in one screen, and I'll show you an example, they see their own candidates from perm, their own candidates from contingent, their own candidates from the talent pool, their internal mobility candidates, but also all the candidates that we have access to in the Randstad group. So anybody walks into a Randstad branch anywhere in the world, 1 second later, this person shows up in the system of Honeywell to the Honeywell recruiters, right? Like that's what we're trying to do. And that's not only with Randstad data, we also have partners like the Mom Project. We are working with a dyslexic community now, like diverse talent communities we're trying to add to that integration layer. A couple of examples on the next slide, Hary, we can just skip through it, I think. Here's what we do for the hiring manager. For the hiring manager, we didn't want to build another layer. So we've partnered with a partner that we work with to build a hiring manager interface to all of those channels through the channel that they're already using, and that is Teams or Slack or Google, right? We don't want them to go to another platform and take a decision. So we can get the requisition creation process into Microsoft Teams here in this case. We can get the interviews in there, the CVs in there, we can schedule the interview there, we can trigger an action, we can basically orchestrate the actions of the hiring manager through the interface that they're using every day. Next slide, Hary. This is the recruiter unification, where you see here a customer success representative role where you have, and I removed the last names, Stephen, Ty, Robin, Richard, Gerard, Willem, Joseph being stack ranked against the requisition. And as you can see on the right slide, they all come from different sources. So Stephen and Ty come from the Randstad OPCO databases here. Robin and Richard are coming from the ATS of the client. Gerard comes from Randstad. Willem comes from Avature, a talent pool that the client curates. And Joseph comes again from Workday. So we provide one unified experience to the recruiter, which makes it very efficient for them to look into the different channels. I think that's already the last slide. Let's open it up for discussion. Yeah, we can skip that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can start a question. If you, as you think about, there are like the reason we have independent VMSs like Fieldglass or Beeline is because, like, let's say if Randstad builds the system, how do your other competitors, large competitors like Allegis and all of them, and again, you have to have complete comfort that they will also be using that system.
No, I'm sorry. I misunderstood that. The VMSs and the ATSs and the talent pool systems, whatever, you choose whatever you want. Like it's a company choice. So we work with Fieldglass, Beeline, Windley, but the integration layers that we have built are integrating with these systems. So VMS is not, have you ever tried to put your CV into a VMS? It's a miserable experience, right? Have you ever tried even in an ATS, even in consumer companies? Like you can buy a Tesla in 3 minutes on the website. Try to apply for a job at Tesla. Like it's difficult, right? These experiences are not...
Let me reframe my question just so that I'm... let's say, for example, us or many of the clients that we know also have Randstad as a vendor, Manpower, Allegis, all of your large top 10, top 5 competitors also as vendors. If I'm using this system as the prime for me, then I also have to be comfortable that all my other prime vendors are also comfortable using a system built by their competitor. If they aren't comfortable with using that system, it makes it very difficult for me to use this as my primary source. Where do you stand with that?
No, I think I think we're too high level to answer the question. Let's be a bit more granular. In perm recruitment, right?
No,
We're deploying
okay, you asked me to be specific. I'll be specific to you. In contingent, you have contingent competitors.
Yes.
Right? Which is Allegis, at least I'm using the names that I understand, Adecco, let's say like Adecco and Allegis, we use them a lot. If I have to get access to their resources as well through this one system, they have to be comfortable to working with you so that I can get access to them through the system.
No.
If not, no? Okay, continue, please.
No, they don't, because the systems of the client is still the field glass VMS system that's in the backend, right? That manages the supply chain. All we do is for individual candidates that apply, like in the case of an Adecco would do everything on their side, right? They have their own front office systems, they shortlist their candidates, they look at the requisitions, and they will upload their candidates into Fieldglass. The candidate doesn't interact with the experience in the VMS, right? But there's a dimension of freelancers from marketplaces. There is more and more direct sourcing in MSP programs where companies use their own brands to attract and nurture relationships with freelancers, build their own talent pools, internal networks, right? Like your known talent that you have worked with before previously. Those people have, how do they get into the VMS? So all of the real talent that's interacting with the VMS is now not interacting with the VMS anymore directly, but it's interacting with a layer on top of the VMS that does nothing but provides a joyful experience as a door into the VMS. And by the way, even competitors, if they, we have seen competitors that had more automated ways of sending candidates, more self-service ways of sending candidates into VMSs, even they would then lead them through this experience layer, because you as a candidate, you don't want to put your data into a Fieldglass. I'm sorry if there's any SAP.
Thomas, just a couple of questions that have come up. Kirsten had her hand, Kirsten, sorry, had your hand up first.
Hello. I feel like I'm going to take the conversation perhaps in a slightly different direction, but I'm really curious. So my personal background is in kind of experience design, service design, more of the human-centered lens on kind of the joyful experience we're talking about. But I find it super interesting in a lot of these conversations, it really defaults to a tech conversation and kind of the back end conversation. I'm curious to understand how much emphasis is actually being placed on mapping that ideal state experience, putting kind of a true experience or brand lens on it. How does an organization deliver an experience that's distinctly them versus just status quo?
Thank you.
What I'm seeing, I'll start real quick. So in my advisory practice, companies are just defaulting straight to tech and they think it's a silver bullet and they're not caring for all of those things ahead of time. So when we're typically coming in, we're trying to help them retrofit what they implemented. And so what we're pushing in our advisory practice is that, hey, you need to think about the branding, you need to think about the process, you need to think about how you bring this in an effective way so that it lands and you get the return on the investment.
Yeah, and we've actually evolved here from we started with a employer value proposition often, and we had a marketing team that was a branding team that worked with the client on what is the unique thing of your brand, and this is all, by the way, white label, client blended, fully optimized to the client message. Then we went from an employer value proposition. We said, okay, maybe a contingent value proposition is slightly different than an employer value proposition. So we developed a contingent value proposition. And I think because we're going a lot from reactive sourcing to a requisition to a proactive curation of a group of people that we really like and want to work with. The newest term that we have coined in our talent marketing team is relationship value proposition. It's really like, how do we want to build a sustainable and we don't do this by sending a monthly newsletter, right? Like that's not going to work. How are we really relevant, and how do we differentiate the brand itself? So I was talking a lot about tech, but actually we don't sell tech. We're not a tech reseller in Randstad. So if you want to do anything like this, you need to look at people, process, and technology, and the brand and the marketing element of this is like huge.
Thanks, Thomas. Patrick?
I think I love the slide. I thought it was great. It's something I've been thinking about a lot myself. And I was curious on that was like the tech solution. How do you change the culture inside particularly large companies to understand that if you've created a rec for a full-time employee, you don't that's not necessarily the solution. Like process and culture kind of get messy. And I'm wondering what experience you've had so far rolling it out, or if you can speak to how you think you will change culture in companies to embrace this approach.
Yeah, to be fair, I think most companies in the world are not there yet. And we have been successful in running this either on the RPO side or on the MSP side, right? Like to create experiences for the hiring manager and for the talent and for the recruiter. If we look at either contingent or procurement, we have very few clients, a handful maybe, where we're bringing together these experiences. And there are lots of questions around compliance. Can we really do this? What are, how can we, the communication must be totally different to continue. What about co-employment risks? So the rec needs to be written differently. It's more an SOW type of work versus, you're in part of a team. So there's a lot to overcome to really bring these experiences together. And there are not many companies in the world that are on that track, I think, but we're working with a handful, and I would create it co-creation, and we're maybe 40% there.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I mean, as somebody who's spent a lot of time on the internal side and coaching teams, trying to navigate and be flexible, because for certain in-demand skills like AI, or when I worked on Wall Street, it was high-frequency trading systems developers. We said, first, how do we get this talent to help us build this thing that makes us more money? If the use case of the ROI was big enough, then we were given license to, the lawyers are going to have to sort things out. But one thing that I would worry about looking at a system like Randstad, like it's valuable from a customer lens, it's valuable from an operator lens, but if I'm one of these partners, to Balaji's point, I would be pretty upset that my order flow and my information is being ingested and then modeled on. And on Wall Street, they had explicit rules about vendors being in different parts of the ecosystem and the transaction path. So like, I'm not saying you're doing the right or wrong thing. I'm just saying as a large vendor, there's probably some paperwork that says where the data is allowed to flow. Right. And I wonder if that's factored into some of your chats.
Yeah, and let me clarify one thing. I think the slide that I showed shows a problem that we see in the industry. The fact that we have solved it for some of our clients where we run MSP and RPOs and where we source and we bring candidates in, doesn't mean that we're the only one who has the license to solve this problem. What I want to do more than selling Randstad here, because that's not the purpose of this thing, is that companies need to start thinking of the experience of these three parties. And I would be perfectly happy if a large organization would walk that road and try to build a more convenient experience for talent, a more convenient experience. And they can go and buy vendors like, there are vendors out there like Eightfold who can create that, Eightfold Hyatt Score, who can create that recruiter layer, right? On the talent side, there's not super much available. On the hiring manager side, Hyatt Score is making progress. So I think there are vendors that clients can partner with and build their own ecosystem that then is maybe easier to use for a broader landscape. We are just piloting because it's an area you know, when we as Randstad, I'm not going to build a chatbot. When we decide to build, we are building something where we think, okay, that's not available in the market. We want to help drive the market into a certain direction. If there's a commercial solution, we would never go and build something, because then we would just partner and buy it. So I'm not saying Randstad's the only one who can solve it. I'm saying the problem still is relevant, and it needs to be addressed probably by the company itself then in the end.
Can I ask one more question? Is that okay, Ashley?
Go for it.
Thomas, you and I have been chatting on and off for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And I wonder, how do you see the nature of Randstad changing overall? So this is one piece, but it's got a lot of fingers. And I wonder how you see the organization in 5 or 7 years. What's your sense, kind of at a 1,000-foot level, not 50,000 and not 10 feet?
You put me on, I hope no analyst is in the call here.
No, I promise.
Put me on the spot here. So I mean, Hary, you know, Hary knows the organization probably, you know, much longer and better than I do. But I see the whole market, not only Randstad, right, has accepted that the world is changing, right? We can't just continue like we delivered staffing services the last 30 years. So I think we as an organization, and you saw some of the solutions we've invested in, we're keen to not only digitalize the current processes, which has happened, I think, to a large extent, but also to rethink the way we work. And we have done, I don't know if you followed our analyst course, but we have done some organizational changes in the last 12 months. And we've become very much from a local for local staffing company. We've become a truly global company as an organization. We have global reporting lines now on functions, on, you know, global P&Ls for clients. We're deciding much more what's in the best interest for Randstad globally, and we're bringing together our efforts in certain areas than we have been doing before. And I think that's a prerequisite for us to survive. And I think we need to, you know, we need to pick our fights. There are probably areas and staffings that will be fully digitalized, right? And the question will be like, what role will we play in that? And I'm looking at more blue collar type of roles. And there will be areas that, you know, maybe services, businesses, outplacement, more people related services, that coaching that won't be fully digitalized in the next, you know, decade. And I think we have a clear strategy where we move, but I think I see a lot of change in the last, like I joined Randstad in 2016 by an acquisition of my company. John knows that, but right. And I didn't really expect to stay long, right? I said to the board, I'm here for 2 years, but I'm an entrepreneur, I'll be out. But the changes that happened since 2016 to 2023 are enormous in the company.
He just likes us all. What I would add is that, look, one of the things in the 12 years that I've been here, it was really hard to do business with Randstad, because it was like, okay, I'm talking to you, Hary, but I want this, but that's not you. So I need to go talk to that person over there. And then that exponentially was like exploded by geographies and local for local. If we really want to create a seamless experience for candidates and for hiring managers and for people who are procuring talent, then we have to restructure ourselves in a new light, and so that it's easy for our clients to work with us, and that they can work in a seamless way with us, whether it's digital or with an account executive who's helping them solve their problem, whether it's in Poland or whether it's in the US.
Hary and Thomas, one other last question. Can a boutique survive in the next decade, or is this got to be a consolidation phase, because the infrastructure costs are just going to be significant? What's your sense of that?
I think both, personally. I think a boutique can survive if it's very niche and very specialized on a certain type of talent. I think if you're just a boutique generalist staffer, we will see consolidation, because the market is, there's a lot of globalization happening, remote hiring. All these reasons why the staffing market was so local and so fragmented are going away. So I think the large players will have a huge advantage because they can invest more in infrastructure and global hiring infrastructure than the small players can. If you want to survive as a small player, you need to be like super laser sharp in a profile.
Gotcha.
Ditto.
Thank you.
Let's finish it off with San. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, sorry, I just saw the time. I wanted to ask a question in a different direction. I think we see in a lot of markets, brands, especially leadership brands, sort of really paying attention to some of the social concerns that are affecting their market and stepping up in an activist way. Just wondering, I mean, obviously, not just Randstad. I mean, you're representing the industry as well as being a market leader, but we've had a lot of, we seem to have a lot of conversations. I'm not specific to this one, but we seem to have a lot of conversations around technology and managing, like the managing side or the hiring side. But there's a lot of social issues around, ageism and things like that. What do you think the role is of a brand like Randstad to sort of really step into some of those conversations and try and create more opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's a super important role. I mean, I know that we are very much about giving back to society at Randstad, and we have some amazing programs. And we, our Polish operating company came through when the Ukrainian crisis happened. We have our Hire Hope program in the US where we're helping pull women out of prostitution and sex trades and get them, educated and trained so that then we can find them meaningful work. So that's all really important. We are the first large staffing organization to have a chief equity officer globally. So I think that is really important to us. I think some of the things you raise, in addition to promoting diversity and equity and inclusion, but also things like ageism, I think should be on the agenda for our industry to set the tone for how we deal with it and how we become better.
Yeah, thanks. All right, last question, link or comment. Go ahead.
To follow up with San's question to you, I hear that you're doing things related to diversity and equity and inclusion, but how many social scientists do you have on your C-suite staff? How many social sciences and ethics lawyers and attorneys are part of the technology conversation?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I can try to start. So we, as the only large staffing company, we have two things. We have an ethical AI board and an ethical data board, where people with the respective backgrounds and technologists and business leaders are coming together and are debating our position, and we're releasing like policies that we also live. And we have taken decisions where the business said we really need this, and we said from an ethical perspective, we don't feel like as a company that represents our values, and we're ready to take a hit financially because we don't think that's the right thing to do. And I know for of one topic at least where all of our competitors are walking that path, and we've passed on it because we don't believe it's the right thing. So I think we're paying a lot of attention. Do we have social scientists? We have a chief equity officer. We have chief diversity officers in all the countries. We don't really have scientists, I'd say, that approach the topic very scientifically. I think we're trying to be responsible, and we're trying to make educated decisions on the topic, and we're taking this very serious.
Man, this has been a great conversation. I know we're at time, but Hary and Thomas, I really appreciate you guys being here. And I think Thomas, you said it best. We all have to reinvent what we're doing in this new age, especially not just because it's everything's platform driven and tapping into ecosystems. At least that's our belief. That's the future of talent, right? There's we've got to build platforms and technology and make sure there's social scientists and the human side of things, but all dipping into different kinds of ecosystems, whether it's internal ecosystems or external ecosystems or even kind of open innovation crowds. So, there's a lot to talk about, and I really appreciate you guys being here and the really good, fruitful conversation. I think for me, the biggest thing it highlights is that we're all in this together. We're all kind of feeling around in the dark, you know, as Edgar Allan Poe used to say, and you know, we've got a lot further to go. And I think we'll be better off if we all work together to solve these problems. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we've got to do the right thing by the talent and the right thing by the organizations. And I think we keep that in mind, then we'll all be successful. But thanks again for showing up today and sharing some of your thoughts, and lots more good stuff to come.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thomas and Hary from being here. Thanks for everyone for the community for being here. So our next session is Thursday, May 18th is our next community call. We're switching things up a bit. We're going to have some highly successful freelancers coming in to share their experiences and insights of how they've built their businesses on and off platform. So that's going to be really fun. We also, yeah, a great perspective from a different voice in the community. And then after that, on June 1st, we have the good and the bad and the ugly of building teams of freelancers. So lots of great stuff coming down the pike. Make sure to check back in with us. And yeah, thanks to everyone for being here.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Thanks. Love you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.